Hi, my name is Cristina, and I am currently pursuing a PhD at the University of Murcia in the area of IT law. In addition, I am involved in the European research project Olympus that conducts research in the area of identity management. Today, I bring you a legal topic, the adaptation of the data protection path assessment methodology to evaluate the degree of privacy by design, achieving technological proposals that have not been implemented yet. I'm going to make a special reference to identity management systems for reasons of the project in which I am currently working in. But I would like to note that the methodology that we are proposing could be easily adapted to any other sector with the corresponding modifications. So here you can see the content that I'm going to present. I would like to know that you can pose any question, remark, or if you think that something is to be explained in more detail by the end of this presentation. Just to introduce the topic, we are all aware that nowadays information society is posing a set of challenges, in particular in the area of identity management. We could highlight surveillance practices that are developed by a reduced number of identity providers. Also, the change in communication habits has led identity theft to become one of the most widespread forms of cybercrime. And we are thinking, how can we solve these problems? How can we fight these challenges? Solutions consist in regulations, in good practices, but also in the design of technologies and the development of privacy preserving and safe technologies. We are aware nowadays that safe technologies do not only refer, as I note here, to complex techniques or encryption processes, but they also imply comprehensible concepts for end users who play a key role in the fight against cybercrime. This is the reason why in the paper and also here we introduce what we call the two sides or dimensions that must be considered in the development of privacy preserving and safe technologies. We refer to an internal dimension or the architecture to refer to those technologies that aim to prevent those attacks directed against the technology itself. For example, those attacks that aim to compromise databases. And an example here would be the case of Olympus technology. To sum up, Olympus technology distributes the data of the IDP among several partial IDPs. It allows password fragmentation, and through these techniques, it hampers different types of identity theft attacks. Nevertheless, Olympus does not introduce any other innovation with regard to the side of the user, what we call the external side, besides a multi-factor authentication method. So, for example, the expanded password system would be a technology in this external side or the side of the user that refers to those technologies that aim to protect the user so he's not tricked or he or she would not reveal personal data such as password or personal identification data. More specifically, the expanded password system is basically a software that converts images that could be uploaded or selected by the user into this password. So with regard to phishing attacks, in those cases in which the user is presented this password box or a set of images that do not include the ones he or she has selected, he or she would know immediately that this is an attempt of phishing. So, well, basically, we could say that the inspirational source of our multi-phase data protection path assessment is the concept of privacy engineering. In fact, the Spanish Data Protection Agency has referred to the concept of privacy engineering as the process for the implementation of privacy in the whole life cycle of an information system where the processing of personal data takes place. Let's say that in practice, this would materialize in a set of phases. First of all, we have to define which are the minimums, the privacy requirements, and then we have to design the architecture. Let's say that this is going to be a dynamic process in which we would evaluate the technology, whether it fulfills these privacy requirements previously stated, and in the end, we could get a final evaluation and a final architecture design. So basically, based on this idea is why we are proposing a multi-phase data protection impact assessment. We would like to know that the data protection impact assessment is not a tool specifically envisaged for the case of technologies that have not been implemented yet, but for context-based scenarios, as I am noting here. So we're proposing to perform this first analysis because we think it could be beneficial, as it could avoid risk linked to the technology. As legal experts, sometimes we note that some of the privacy risks are not linked to the context in which technology is deployed, but to the technology itself, but now it's too expensive to be modified. So in the end, we are going to give a new approach to the data protection impact assessment methodology in 2 layers. The first layer would refer to the evaluation of the technology itself, and the second layer would refer to context-based scenarios. So I'm going to explain you in short the steps that we should follow in this methodology. First of all, the description of the scope of the study. Basically, it's the description of the technology, its main difference with regard concerning existing technologies. And we have also to describe the data flows that refer to the transfer, modification, and storage of data. For example, in the case of identity management, it refers to identity lifecycle, how enrollment, authentication, ID proofing, modification of data takes place in this specific identity management system. Then, as second step, I would always recommend to analyze whether personal data are in fact processed. This is important because nowadays, due to encryption techniques, it's not clear in every case that personal data are processed. So I would recommend to study whether individuals, the data subject, are identified or could be potentially identifiable. In practice, I would recommend to classify the parties before whom the data subject could be identified, and the types of risk that could cause this discovery of data that would lead to identification or re-identification. Then we could classify the results, the degree of anonymization in low, medium, high. I would like to highlight that only if a high level of anonymization is achieved before all parties, our DPI could stop at this phase, because otherwise we would be in the case of pseudonymized data that, according to the GDPR, must be considered as personal data. So, well, the third step would be the risk assessment. Risk management is essential in order to determine the threats and dangers to which an identity, on our information system is exposed. I would recommend to, first of all, classify the resources. I would suggest at least 3 resources: risk relating to the particularities of the service, risk relating to the architecture system components, and risk relating to the users. As you can note here, these 2 resources refer to the 2 dimensions that I have noted at the beginning of this presentation, the internal and the external side, and risk relating to the particularities of the service. For example, in this case, I am referring to identity management systems. So in the end, it's, for example, identity theft or information leaks. Once determined the resources, we have to choose the likelihood and impact levels. We are going to select an scale. For example, in the case of Olympus, we selected the impact and likelihood scales provided by the Spanish Data Protection Agency. And we have to determine the risk levels. I would recommend to determine the highest risk level to multiply the maximum likelihood for the maximum impact, and the opposite to obtain the lowest risk level to multiply an unlikely threat for an eligible impact. In the middle, we can create as many risk levels as we desire, but keeping proportionality between them. In fact, this is an adaptation of the risk level scale provided by the risk management software pillar, but adapted to the likelihood and impact criteria that are provided by the Spanish Data Protection Agency. So, well, basically, the last step in this risk assessment is to determine the risk dimensions that are relevant for our DPI, because we would find some risk that affect availability of the service, but not a privacy risk. So I would recommend to consider at least these three dimensions: integrity of the data are correct and complete; confidentiality of the data remain unknown before unauthorized parties; and authenticity of users and information that basically refers that information is real and refers to the corresponding natural person. So we have to perform this first layer. We have to assign values for likelihood and impact. I would like to note that in some cases, especially because we are talking about technologies that have not been implemented yet, we won't know which type of data are going to be processed. So, for example, if we know that the technology is going to be deployed in the health sector. In those cases, I recommend to assign a medium value for impact, like if it is average data, is something that we can also modify in the second layer, depending on the sector in which we are going to deploy or implement this technology. So basically, by performing this first layer, we would obtain already a verdict. We can conclude that the technology achieves an adequate level of privacy by design. The opposite, it will never achieve an adequate level of privacy by design, or the technology still requires modifications. In this case, we should run a deadline to introduce this modification. It's what we have done in the case of Olympus. And thanks to this first layer, we were able to detect some drawbacks and solve them with regard to the final architecture's design. So the second layer is the context-based scenarios analysis. In this case, what we are going to study is more data protection principles. It's more similar to the traditional idea of the DPI. Such as lawfulness, data minimization, as I note here. We can also include some aspects that we didn't know before. For example, the staff in charge of the data processing or of the information system, or for example, if we know which specific type of personal data are going to be processed. Here I have just noted an example with Olympus. Just to make it sure, Olympus is a technology that hampers identity theft with regard to other technologies existing in the market, but to function, it requires to increase the amount of data processed because it needs to replicate users' attributes among the different partial IDPs. So basically, here I provide an example in which Olympus provides IDM service for a streaming platform such as Netflix. Here I say that it fulfills all data protection principles. And then I say that Olympus will just process the name, age, and email of the users. The financial information such as credit cards or, for example, the content visualized remains on the side of the service provider. So the conclusion is that Olympus introduced an improvement in this case, because as you can say, the main problem is the impersonation of the user, because by impersonating the user, the attacker could access the credit card information or the content visualized. So with regard to, if we compare it with assistant technologies, it reduced the risk of impersonation, which is the real risk in this case, since unauthorized access to personal data is not a relevant risk. As you can see, the impact is limited because Olympus will just be processing the name, the age, and the email of the natural person. So in the end, is not a very important risk in those cases. There is unauthorized accesses to this data because these data are not sensitive. So just to conclude, and for reasons of time, we propose this multi-phase DPI because it could be more adapted to the evolutive reality of a technological project. And also, we think that the future of technology is multidisciplinary, and at least from our perspective, we need to adapt to it. And law must be adapted so it's not perceived as a barrier for innovation, but as an essential safeguard for the protection of fundamental rights and civil liberties. So thank you very much for your attention. I would be available for any questions, and I wish you a very good day. Thank you.